In another change from regular programming, today I'm speaking with Rosie Macphail. Rosa is a recruiter at Major Players, and she looks after the senior marketing appointments. And given my conversations with folk over the last few months, the recruitment process has come up a lot and in each episode. So today, Rosa will give us all a bit of an update on the state of the market, take us through some trends that they're experiencing at Major Players, and maybe try and give some tips and advice on CVs and job hunting in general. So please welcome Rosie. Rosie, how are you?
I'm good, thanks. How are you?
I'm fantastic. Thank you for doing this. I appreciate it. I know this is in an official capacity for you. You're representing the recruitment side of the Badlands world that
The
I'm talking to
recruitment
people.
side.
Well, yeah, recruitment and recruitment process and internal talent teams has come up a lot in my chats, both good and bad. We all have recruiters, and we're all leaning on them. And as I started talking to people who are job hunting, I just thought it'd be good to try and get someone from the recruitment side, the internal talent team side, who I'm going to be talking to next week, someone from an internal talent team, and just to kind of get your side of the state of the issue at the moment, because clearly there's a thing going on, which is what I've been discussing with a lot of folk, and I'm sure from a recruitment business side of things, you guys have noticed things over the last 12, 24 months. Maybe you haven't, but it feels like you probably have. So it'd be interesting to hear about that today. But I think before we get into some of those bits, I think it'd be useful for my millions of listeners, wink, wink, millions, my millions of listeners, to give everyone a bit of a summary of who you are and what you do, and how you've ended up at Major Players, and what Major Players is, in case someone doesn't know.
Yeah, of course, of course. So Major Players is actually one of the recruitment brands at Major Group. We have a tech consultancy, tech recruitment firm, and an executive recruitment firm working across UK and the EU. We specialize in marketing, digital, product, tech recruitment, and Major Players specializes in the marketing creative side of things across freelance and perm. I manage our senior appointments division here. My background, actually, I started in travel sales in Australia. And then when I came back to the UK, I started in marketing recruitment in 2018. And moved to London a couple of years ago, just as the jobs market started to dip, which was an interesting decision at the time.
Yeah.
But I moved to Major Players in January because it's a female-led recruitment business, which I absolutely loved.
Yeah.
And opportunities came up, managed senior appointments, which is, you know, my background. I'm traditionally more in the B2B SaaS tech space, but always been marketing recruitment, and just, yeah, love it here.
Nice. Yeah. Well, look, I know Major Players, I think, from my agency side of things over the last 20 years. And yeah, you're obviously, you're in there for more the other side of the fence from a marketing point of view. And I've been speaking to a lot of marketeers and, brand leads and folk who are in a similar position to a lot of the creative agency folk who are find themselves in this weird time. So you mentioned that you started at a point where the job market wasn't particularly great. And I think everyone navigated the COVID years, and there seems to have been a huge influx of job placements post COVID. And then are we now, I guess, is the effects of the overhiring part of the reason that the last 12, 24 months seemingly seem quite horrendous for a lot of folk? I mean, can you give us a bit of an update on the state of the market and how you're seeing and hearing things at the moment versus,
Yeah.
a year or so ago? Please tell us that there are green shoots. Please tell us it's
There
going to
is
get
some. Don't worry, I have some green shoots to talk about. I will talk about
excellent.
some positivity. I think to reach that, let's sort of go back the last couple of years.
Yeah, please.
If you look at 21 and 22, I mean, there was just such a huge investment boom. And that inevitably led to a huge amount of recruitment. It really changed the landscape of things. And a change generally in the job seeker landscape and the recruitment landscape with regards to working policies. And there's just so much changed because of 2020. We'll never, operate in the same world again. Um, I think after that huge boom in 21 and first half of 22, there just inevitably had to be that dip. And
Yeah.
in some of the data that we've looked at across the whole hiring landscape, so not just marketing creative, and you know not just marketing, creative, and digital that we specialize in, but generally across FS, healthcare, all of those divisions, the creative digital tech industry suffered the lowest. Sorry, I keep getting a call through. Suffered the lowest point
You're in
in
demand,
August.
Rosie. People need
Yeah, I
jobs.
know. Sorry.
Right, okay,
Um,
don't worry. It's okay.
someone's
Keep
trying to
going.
call me. Don't they know that I'm on a podcast? Thank you.
Oh, come on. One of
Um,
my listeners calling you to help.
yeah, probably. Um,
Go for it.
yeah. So the marketing and digital space suffered the lowest point in August 2023.
Right.
The lowest point of all industries. So that really did feel, last year a really, really tough time for
So
candidates in the
just,
market.
just to talk about me for a second, that was a month after I arrived back in the UK after 5 years out, expecting just to walk into a new role. And I was like, no, 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 no,
Right.
no. You're in the main, you're in the bottom of the dip. So yeah, that
Yeah,
rings
yeah,
true.
yeah.
So
Yeah.
sorry to
Well,
interrupt.
people that I speak to are like, no, no. People say, you know, well, I've never known a job market like this. I've never had a problem getting a job before.
Yeah.
I've always been either facilitated by a trusted recruiter, or through my own network and means, I've always secured a role. And we are not operating in a market that is, we're looking at 2008 and COVID levels of of people not hiring, and
Right.
difficult, challenging market. It's really, really tough. So yeah, I think
Yeah.
it's been a really, really tough time. It's really affected people's confidence and things like that as well. It's been really sad to see. And so the main message from that, I guess, to take is it's not you, it's the market, and it's the economic difficulty last year. Number of contributing
No,
factors, but yeah, it was very
for
challenging.
sure. And some of my conversations with quite senior folk from both sides of the aisle, as it were, there's clearly a lot of forces at play here. The global nature of our business, the global brands that we all work on. Everything's connected globally, as much as people don't want to think it is, or think that the UK is an insular little place that operates on its own. Everything's connected. So it's an important part of the conversation I'm having with people, which you kind of have to learn through going through a bit of pain. Is it's probably not just you. There's a lot of other factors that are at play here. And I think once you start to realize that, it becomes a little less scary, because you start thinking, well, hang on, it's not that I've done something wrong, or so it's good to hear that from you and your side, that yeah, it's clearly an incredibly challenging circumstance the last year or so, which I guess brings us up to today, June. Have you seen anything this year that's given you a little bit of hope and a little bit of more positivity that you can pass on to your current clients and the people that you work with and that are working with you? Are you starting to see that, or am I just hoping beyond hope there? Are you
Yeah,
starting to see things?
there's a couple of trends that we can look at in the market that demonstrate, to use your phrase, green shoots. There's a 2023 saw the lowest state of workforce confidence, and
Right.
that is having a bounce back, which is great. Um, we looked at some of the data from our census shows that people are much more open to moving roles now. So, in a market that has been so stagnant with not many people hiring and lots of people looking, once people start to move around, that will create those vacancies, and people will start to move, which is great, because it just creates that kind of transience within the market at
Yeah,
all
I mean,
levels.
the analogy I've been using with people is kind of musical chairs, and the music
Yeah,
stopped, and there isn't a chair to even try and get on. There's just no chairs left.
yeah,
No one's moving from their chairs, even though the music's playing.
yeah,
So
yeah, yeah,
yeah, it's good to hear that there's starting to see a little bit. Sorry, I'm
yeah,
desperate.
yeah,
I'm desperate to let you talk and let people, but I'm so fascinated by it in terms of what my own experiences are and the experiences of people I'm
yeah.
talking to. So I apologize. Keep going.
No,
Sorry.
no. That's a great analogy, though, and it is just very true. And I do remember having conversations with people last year where it was just like it's the role is just not there. The role is
Yeah.
just not there. But that's flip that 2 years ago. I was having conversations with clients. The candidates are just not there. Like
Right.
as much as you search,
Really.
as much budget as you put behind it, I
Right.
will not be able to find you a candidate for this role, which feels bizarre now
And is that
to
because
have had
people
such.
didn't they have the confidence to move at the time? Was that related to kind of a bit of insecurity around COVID years? And, you're almost like batten down the hatches, didn't we, in our personal lives? It's like, right, there's such chaos in the world. And I think that probably did have an effect on people. But yeah, I'm sure then has started to things become super normal again in life a little bit. You start to then
Yeah.
think slightly normally again, right?
Yeah. Well, this is what I mean. Normal, what is normal now? We
Right.
don't have a normal workplace landscape to be looking at. I think what I'm referencing there is in 21, when suddenly all these investments were unlocked, huge, multi million pound investments that were not present before. Everything came from was delayed from COVID. You have somebody, take a PPC manager, for example. You had a company, people were desperate to recruit paid media because everything moved into e-com, and the companies went into retention mode. People were getting counter
Right.
offers. Even if they were offered the job, they were getting counter offers that were like 20, 30K more than their current salary. So I'd have to say, if somebody was looking for a PPC manager, I'd have to say, you're going to have to wait, or you're going to have to pay double the amount of salary that you've budgeted
Wow.
for that role.
Unbelievable.
There is a crazy increase, and it was such a bizarre conversation to be having at the time. It does mean now there's lots of people who are on quite high salaries that were increased at that time, but then it was such a boom. What goes up must come down, and we'd just seen a complete change in those conversations to be having around the challenge of hiring.
And is it fair to say that it flipped completely in the last from that time to now? Because I think one of the things I've noticed personally, and I'll only talk about my experiences, even though some of them have been validated with my conversations with other very senior folk, both sides of the aisle. There seems to be a lot of title inflation and salary deflation going on at the moment. There seems to be, when roles do come up, I'm like, well, that salary, that it's great that they're showing the salary, but that salary is for like 2 runs down the ladder compared to that title. So there seems to be this weird salary deflation versus
Yeah, I
a
think
title inflation. Is that true, or am I just greedy? Like,
no.
but it
It's
doesn't
yeah.
resonate with past salaries and past titles that I've experienced, for 20 years. They don't make sense to me at the moment. Are you seeing that from a client briefs point of view?
I think titles always need to be taken with a pinch of salt. They're always arbitrary across businesses. But we are in. Let's be frank here. We are in an employer's market.
Yeah.
So if they have a role that's live, that's a head of marketing, they can. It, it's a it's commercially thinking to put a salary on it that they feel is right for that title, even if that doesn't translate to what a head of marketing was previously paid at somebody within their industry, at another company within their industry.
I
Does
mean,
that make
I had
sense?
that
So
conversation literally yesterday about that exact same thing. Someone been asked to take like 25 grand pay decrease from the last time that they were working to do the exact same role at a different brand. So that's super challenging for folk when they're trying to get back in. But
yeah,
there's a point where you go,
very
whoa,
challenging.
you know,
It's very challenging, but it's very indicative of the market at the moment, and
right?
we can't challenge those trends because a company would just say, but that's what people are paying at the moment, and that's what people are accepting.
Yeah,
So it's really hard to balance it, because I would say to somebody, don't underestimate your worth. But also the salaries from 2, 3, 4 years ago, we cannot compare to the salaries now. Despite the cost of living crisis, despite the increase in cost of living, all of that kind of stuff. I totally appreciate where candidates are coming from with that. But if you are, weighing up between not having a role or taking a 20K dip from what you were on a few years ago, I can assume, especially if the job was great, I can assume where you would lie. But it puts people in a really tricky position. I
yeah,
totally
it does.
appreciate that. It's really
It's
challenging.
hard. No, for sure, it's hard, and I think everyone's individual case will be different. But I think, yeah, there's clearly something that's you've unpacked it, so it's everyone understands, but it's then slightly part of the problem, because I will keep the person's name and title out of it at the moment. But I had an example where someone had they decided, well, look, there's clearly no roles at my level, so I'm fine. I'll happily go down a run or two, and because I like working and I love the industry, and I'll go and do that. That person couldn't then even get seen for a role 2 or 3 runs down to what they were at previously, because it didn't make sense to anyone. But even though that person was willing to do it, he couldn't. It's all right. I've revealed the gender. That person couldn't even then get in to be seen, even though they were willing to go and do something, much less pay, a title bump, a title or two down. So I don't know what my point is, other than it's fine
Well,
if people are willing to do it, but then the recruitment process needs to be open to that as well. There's going to be
yeah,
there's going to be a lot of senior folk out there that will be happy to go, not happy, but will do it because needs must and all. People have
yeah,
mortgages and car payments and
yeah,
children,
yeah.
and so
Especially at that
how do you
senior
think?
end.
Yeah, how
Yeah.
do you have any? And it's fine if you don't, but do you have any thoughts or advice on that? Like how should they go about thinking and approaching stuff like that? Because I think I've put my CV in for something, and they instantly came back and said, "Oh, you're too senior," and it's like, no, I know, but I'll happily come and do that because it sounds interesting and it's fun brand, blah blah blah. But they discounted me based on experience as opposed to willingness, which I found odd. But yeah, do you have any views on it?
It happens a lot. I agree the recruitment process needs to align with what the current market looks like with
Yeah,
regards to available candidates, and willingness is something that you cannot buy or train,
yeah,
a real aptitude to be there. So it's challenging. I would play devil's advocate here in that it's
of course you
hard
would,
to, you think,
recruiter.
of course, classic recruiter coming in.
Here we
But
go, everyone. Here we go.
I've got to do it. Hey, I'm trying to change perceptions here.
I know. You're doing very well.
um, I think, if you are too senior for the role and you step into that role, really, how sustainable is it for you to be in that role? Really, are you going to get bored in the first 6 months?
No, of
Are
course,
you going to
of
really
course.
feel challenged and interested? Are you going to put noses out of joints? Is there other people to consider in that business who would find it odd that you were in that role if
No,
they
that's
were meant?
fair.
You know,
That's fair.
there's definitely things to consider there. I mean, a short-term solution for that is make the role a contract role. You
Yeah,
take the role for 3 months, see how you feel, be searching for another role while you're doing that 3 month contract. If it's working out that you're a different level to the role, but you're really, people say to me, oh, I could do the job standing on my head. It's like, absolutely fair enough. Go and do it as a project for 3 months and see how you go. It depends on the role. Obviously, there's a lot of things to consider in this, but there are a few compromises that I do think hiring managers need to make. But again, look at it from a market perspective. There are so many active candidates that
yeah, they probably
they
don't have
don't have
to.
to
Yeah,
compromise.
for
They just
sure.
don't have to compromise at the moment.
No, no, that's come up a lot at the moment. There's a lot of round pegs perfectly designed for the very few round holes that exist at the moment. And if you're a
Yeah.
slightly square peg, or if you're a slight, you've got 9 out of 10 of the check boxes ticked, they can just wait because they know there's someone with 10. The challenge that I think the people on the outside in the Badlands with me are facing is we're thinking, well, where's the innovation going to come from? Where's the new thinking
Yeah.
going to be brought into a particular role? Because if you're just getting someone in who does it exactly like the person before, then is that going to be is there going to be any progress? Is there going to be any, things need to evolve all the time, right? And if I don't know, and it sounds like a moany complaint based on missing out on something because I hadn't done a very specific sector before, which literally has just happened to me a month or two ago. And I was like, well, I'd never done any of these sectors until you do them. Do you know what I mean? It, it doesn't
Yeah.
matter. A senior business operator is going to adapt to whatever the thing is in front of him based on the skill set you have. So I think that the round pegs and round holes and the lack of risk, the kind of
Yeah.
risk averse nature of the market at the moment is also quite frustrating. Are you seeing that? Are your clients being super specific and because they know they can be?
I mean, yeah, few
Yeah,
points on that we could definitely do whole other podcasts about. I mean, innovation comes from diversity of thought, diversity in the more traditional sense, as in, all the other divisions of it, gender, all that kind of thing. Um, So when we are in a more stable market with more economic certainty, more political certainty, all of that kind of thing, businesses are more willing to take a risk. And what they see as a risk is what you would think is valuable contribution, if you see what I
Yeah.
mean. So,
Yeah. No. No. Of course.
if you're that square peg, you are bringing that risk in inverted commas to the table, and for them, so I think it really works out 99.9% of the time.
Yeah.
But at the moment, we're in business critical hires only.
Yeah.
In fact, we're not anymore, actually. Last year, business critical hires only. And again, this could be a whole other podcast, but marketing is often not seen as business critical in itself. And I'm talking from a marketing perspective because that's my background. Obviously, we have tech and product too, and that, is doing, that's always going to be much more stable. But from a marketing perspective, unfortunately, marketing is often not seen as business critical, and so it's really challenging to say, well, I'm slightly different to what you're looking for, but here's the blueprint of skills that I can set.
Yeah.
I can contribute to business and to this role. And unfortunately, a lot of briefs that come through are very, very specific in their requirements for industry experience, which is it is the lay of the land at the moment. It just is.
No,
I
for
can
sure. And
see a fintech wants a fintech and all that kind of
no,
stuff. So
I understand, and the people I discussing things with on a day to day basis, we understand there's an element of frustration that comes with it. So we said something about green shoots not long ago. What are they?
yeah, yeah. Oh, where there's been a
Where are we
slightly
at the moment?
negative.
Yeah, where
Yeah,
are we
yeah,
at the
yeah.
moment? And let's give my millions of listeners a little bit of, oh, okay, cool.
Okay, okay. Well, I mean, just to sort of lead on from it being a candidate-driven market, I think, and to sort of close the loop on that thread of conversation, clients will have been kind of complacent about that. And just assuming candidates are always going to be there, but we are starting to see that shift.
Right.
We there's an increase in applications, which isn't an increase in candidates in the market. It's an increase of people who are in roles at the moment who are looking to move roles, which is always a good thing for us to be seeing. So although it feels, you look at your LinkedIn ad, it's got 300 applicants, you freak out a little bit.
Yeah.
I can promise you a lot of those aren't actually valid, but it is actually a good thing that more people are applying for jobs, because it means that there is going to be that transience in the market, which is good to see.
Because that feels counterintuitive, right? And it feels terrifying is the wrong word. It can be really overwhelming when you think, because that feels like there are 300 people exactly like me going for the exact same thing in the exact same circumstance, right? And are you saying that level of application is indicative of the wheels spinning a little bit more and starting to move a little bit more, and people are starting to think about moving, which is going to free up other places? Because I think me and a lot of the other Badland wanderers at the moment feels like that's just 300 other out of work people fighting over the one seat.
I promise you it's not.
See,
And
Badlands people, good news, green shoots. This is what I'm saying.
yeah, yeah. And look at LinkedIn. LinkedIn is a great platform. It can become a little bit of an echo chamber in
Yeah, for
if you
sure.
spend a lot of time on it when you're job searching. You'll see a lot of people who you suddenly feel that a lot of people are in your boat, which they are. But it's, don't let yourself get bogged down by what other people are posting. When people have posted that they've got a new job, it's great to celebrate their success, but it's like, where's mine, and all that kind of stuff, or feeling that you can relate to some other people who aren't in a role. I guess what I'm saying is, you'll see all those live applications, you see all that activity, but don't let it put you off.
Yeah.
Always apply for the job. Always apply for the job. Always follow up on your application. That out of the 300 applicants, I honestly promise you, 5 of those would be right. Would
Right.
even be right for the job. Let alone, are they? I don't know, all of the other things that you have to ask around, would
Yeah,
they
yeah, yeah.
actually match the job spec?
Available,
It's
you
it's
can do
it's
it. Yeah.
crazy. and a lot of the job ads are bots, and a lot of the applications are bots. I get the
Right.
most weird,
Really?
like, I can't even explain it. It's I mean, sorry to LinkedIn. I'm sure that you're really careful on that sort of thing. I hope I'm not getting myself into trouble
No,
talking
no,
about
no.
LinkedIn in this way. I think it's a great platform, but it's just really take every number and everything you see with a big pinch of salt and just
No, you see
apply for the
that
role and keep doing what you're doing.
that's great for people to hear because it's genuinely come up as a point of topic in most conversations I've had with people, and I think so. That's really reassuring for everyone to hear. So, thank you for that. I think on that, it's a nice little pivot. Sorry, do you have something you wanted to add?
Well, it was just that on the um actually no, do you know what? Never mind. No,
It's fine. Look,
you say the pivot.
well, it's attached to it because some of the conversations I've had, we've spent time talking about the application process, dealing with recruiters or talent folk from a communications point of view, and I think from a CV writing point of view, I think it's important to understand from you as a recruiter what are the things that your clients will just instantly kind of look for. And I know you're marketing focused, so it's fine. And there'll be some principles that I think can come across to the other side of the aisle. But do you have any views or kind of tips on that for folk that are listening?
Honestly, it doesn't have to be marketing. I know mine obviously is marketing focused, and there is some marketing and creative things to consider, like having a portfolio and things like that. But broadly speaking, with your CV, you have to be really mindful that your CV doesn't read like the role profile for your job, which sounds a little counterintuitive. But if you just write out your responsibilities, you are not allowing your CV to be what it needs to be, which is demonstrating the value that you as an individual have brought to that role and to that company. So you've got to have metrics on there. You've got to have key achievements. What campaign did you run? What results came from that? What revenue can be attributed to that business because of your work and what you did? And
Yeah,
that is industry agnostic. It can be any, it doesn't have to be marketing, but I mean, particularly with marketing, what were your budgets? What did your leadership equate to? How did you almost have responsibilities? Sorry, almost have achievements rather than responsibilities.
right.
Because if you look at someone who's um, an account manager in a creative agency, people know what an account manager in a creative agency does, broadly speaking.
Yeah, yeah,
You don't have to write out your responsibilities. You do need to write out who's your client base. Who are the clients that you worked on, what industries,
yeah,
um what, was there opportunities for business development, what campaigns did you run, what channels were those campaigns across, what were the budgets, who was in charge, and what happened, what was the results. People forget so much to talk about results. um and what would you have changed even is an interesting and humble thing to sometimes add. um so yeah. And
no, that's super
while we're on the
useful.
CV topic,
No, that's super
sorry, I
useful.
was going to talk.
Go, go. Have you got
Good.
more? Is there even more?
I
Let's
have.
go.
Well, yeah, there's one more piece. I just think you've just got to have it short. It's
Right.
got to be 1 or 2 pages. I can't express
Yeah, yeah,
enough. It
yeah.
doesn't matter how senior you are, and now I can talk about the senior piece. It, even if you are so senior, CMO level, do not have a CV that's longer than 2 pages.
Right.
It's
Okay.
not. It's so hard to cut down your experience. I know, I totally appreciate that, but just huge blocks of texts and big, you kind of, you have to assume that every hiring manager and decision maker, whoever it is only going to look at your CV, you know 10-20 seconds at most, because that's human attention span. No
Yeah,
one's
yeah,
going to
yeah.
sit and really read in detail.
Uh,
So whether you are junior or really senior, it really has to be kept short and sweet.
okay. I'm just deleting stuff from mine as we speak. I love it. I'm just culling huge swathes of life and experiences. Yeah, I wasn't there for 5 years. Don't worry about it. This is no, you're right. I do, but
Well, this is what I mean. It's so hard. I know it's
no,
hard.
but equally, when I've been on the other side of the fence, when you're hiring, of course, you kind of really only you're looking at the last 2-3 years because if they're coming into a similar sort of senior position or maybe stepping up one, then it's nice to know how they got there. But you're really focused on the last few years, which is going to have the most like for like comparison and give you a sense of their ability and achievements that they might be able to bring. So it makes total sense. But then, yeah, it feels like sometimes you want to go, look at the breadth of my career and experience. Look where I've worked. Look where I was in 2004. It really doesn't matter, does
Yeah,
it? It's like,
yeah. Well, it's not that it doesn't matter. I think, and I have this conversation. It all contributes to what's got you to where you are today,
yeah,
which
yeah,
is why you're having those interviews. But you want to be talking about focusing on the last 2, 3 roles, depending on
right.
tenure.
Yeah, yeah, okay.
It just and if you think about it from a digital marketing perspective, stuff that you did 10 years ago will have evolved so much in
Yeah, for
regards to a
sure.
martech perspective, all that kind of thing to consider. It's recent stuff that's clearly that add the most value in an interview process.
Okay, cool. So that's super useful for people to hear. So thank you for that. I guess one final touch point thing that's come up a lot in my conversations and my personal experience has been this kind of weird communication breakdown that seems to be existing. And I'm somewhat undecided whether it's still normal. And my experiences of dealing with recruiters or in-house talent folk are all my experience is based on when I was working. That's when I've ever looked for a new job. I've never looked for a job when I haven't been working before. So my perspective
Hmm.
has shifted this time. So when I've in the past when I've moved around, it would be, hey, recruiter, I've kind of had enough time here. Is there anything out there? Blah blah blah. And a week or two would go by, and they'd come back with some. Hey, these people are looking, and then you'd set up a thing for a week or two later. And that type of passage of time when you're working is nothing because you're working, right? So it doesn't matter. But I think the people who are out of work at the moment, days. Someone talked about it in dog years yesterday to me. It's like, hours and days are just feel like an eternity at the moment from a communications point of view. I, I'm not going to ask you if they're right or wrong, but it genuinely feels like there's a lack of communication outbound to the candidates that are hustling and searching, and particularly the ones that are out of work. I think what I'm really trying to say to you is it feels awful at the moment for those
I
people
know,
because we,
I
we
know.
having to chase the recruiter feels counterintuitive to, and as much as we'll do it. And then we have this fine line of, am I over chasing? Does this seem desperate? Are we just pissing these people off? So do you have a view on that? Is there what would you suggest to people? Is it just take a beat and know that things are happening, or you're
Well,
never going to
yeah.
say yeah, people are shitty, but it's
No, I'm not
genuinely
going to say
something that
that
we
on here.
no, and but the ghosting phenomenon is coming up
I know,
every single
I
day
know.
on any like I'm not even to the people I'm talking to, but like just experiencing it. I see it on LinkedIn constantly in different countries, different markets and things. But do you have a
I
view
know.
on it? Is it a
Yeah,
saturation thing? Is it a volume thing? Like,
I think it links back to the complacency piece that I was talking about earlier with
hmm
regards to clients. I think that's a contributing factor for sure because they just, people. I mean, I'm making such a huge generalist statement there, but
no,
it's
it's
just
fine.
that there are
That's what we're dealing with
candidates
at the
who
moment.
feel that they can, and it is a challenge. Um, I think there are recruiters and then there are recruiters,
Yeah,
and I the less said on that, the better, maybe from me.
yeah.
But I just think I
No, we hear you.
I personally work really hard to make sure that I give people good feedback. I keep people in the loop, especially if I'm representing someone. I mean, I do hear about people interviewing, going through all these stages, and then literally not hearing back, and that is alien to me. That is never, ever, ever how I want to
So,
work. And
no, I was just going to say, look, every single person I've spoken to has that exact experience, which
yeah,
is the worst one, right? If you've gone to that time and effort and you've shown up and you might put a presentation together and you've, all that stuff, and then 6, 7 weeks
yeah,
go by. I'm like, in what way? By that point, we're all old enough to know that we haven't got the job. That's fine. But the lack of
yeah,
humanity attached to the communication is what I think is really killing people from
I
a
know.
mental health point of view. It's really disturbing. Every single person I've spoken to has the low days, and those low days tend to be with inaction or lack of information as opposed to answer. An answer either way is written, but the lack of
Yeah.
information and the lack of movement is what a lot of people are struggling with. Would you
I
suggest that
think,
they hustle and just continue to kind of, or is there a balance?
well, I think my advice to clients, and I would put this out in the stratosphere on here, but also just generally whenever I'm speaking to clients, is have a short recruitment process.
Yeah, yeah.
Don't drag things out. Time kills a process. It really, really does. People lose engagement, all of that kind of thing. So just keep it. It doesn't have to be rushed, but it needs to be efficient. And really be mindful that these candidates that are experiencing with this with you, it's not always going to be a market like this. And the brand experience that they have with you as a client, if you are like that, it's going, people talk and it's
100%.
going to turn
The,
back around.
there's,
So,
there's two
yeah,
agencies that I won't work at now, not because they don't want me to, but just because I'm like, well, you guys just are either unorganized or horrendous or don't care
yeah,
about human, Yeah,
yeah,
I'm hearing that a lot. I think it's
yeah.
great of you to call it out from a client's point of view. I think what I'll do is I'll push back on behalf of everyone in the Badlands. I think what a lot of people have experienced that I've spoken to, and I've experienced it personally, is a a role coming up you'd be brilliant for. Speak to this person. A few weeks go by. Actually, that role's no longer happening at all. And that's the most frustrating one. I'd rather lose it to someone than it just disappear, because that's just bad planning. And I know it happens from a business perspective when a piece of new business might not happen when they thought, or a new brief might not have come in, or there are many factors. But it's almost like we also need recruiters to be 100% locked with the client that this thing is real before everyone gets gears up and goes for it, because it's really happening to a lot of folk that a lot of jobs just disappearing into the ether
Hmm.
or the classic is actually we've found someone internal for it, and it's like, well, that person worked there already, right? They haven't just announced themselves. So it's like, why put people through this? So yeah,
Yeah.
if we could ask you as recruiters to kind of make sure
Well,
they're
yeah,
buttoned down.
it's our job to be asking those questions. And I always ask that question at the beginning of a briefing call if I'm starting to work with somebody. It's all about having all the information in front of you so that you can choose to move forward with the brief. And is the budget here for this role? Have you explored all avenues with your own networks, with
Yeah.
direct candidates? And again, I'm talking about it through a recruitment perspective, but I'm just trying to mitigate any chance of that happening later on down the line. And I can't. There's some things that are uncontrollable. Budgets change. Somebody's network comes up.
No,
Something
of
changes with.
course.
There are those changes that happen. Sometimes as recruiters we're party to it. Sometimes as a third party agency we're not. Sometimes all I can do is say the role's been pulled. I haven't been given any more information, and I'm really sorry.
Yeah,
And
no,
it
no
just
problem.
has to be how our visibility on the market. But I do appreciate that is really frustrating. And I would ask those questions yourself. If you're not going through a recruiter, if you're being referred by a
Yeah,
contact, if you're
yeah,
being,
okay.
speaking to internal talent, can I just triple check that this role has been signed off? I've had a bad experience previously, where they then decided to pull the role, to change the role. Can I just really, I'd love to hear about where you're up to in the recruitment for this role so far. Is it new to market? Have you been looking for a while? What's the history on it? And that will give you some indication.
Nice. Yeah, no,
Um,
that's super useful, and weirdly, I'm sure a lot of people. No, that's. I haven't been doing that as diligently as I should have. So from today, I definitely will be. So that's amazing, Rosie. Thank you. Um,
One final thing I'd like to kind of add into kind of, I said advice to clients about their processes and stuff, but as a candidate, people often say, "Oh, am I being? I don't want to be annoying. I don't want to feel like I look desperate. I don't want,
yeah,
those that kind of narrative." Forget that. Message the person that you interviewed with on LinkedIn if internal aren't getting back to you, and just say, "I've not had a response, and I'd really love some feedback from my interview. Do you know where you're up to on this hire?"
yeah, yeah,
You'll have their email from a Zoom or Teams. You're not, especially if you've interviewed for a role, maybe if you have been put forward for a role and you're not getting feedback from internal, it might be slightly different, or from the recruiter, yada yada. But if we're at that point where you have interviewed, you've given your time, you are owed a response. And so message people and call them. I mean, people are a little afraid to pick up the phone or lean into a challenging conversation. Try to call them if you have their number, or just call the main line. And just I personally think it shows engagement. Um,
I couldn't
again,
agree
within
more.
reason. Don't
Yeah,
don't
I
call
couldn't agree
every
more.
single day, because there is obviously a sensible line, but it doesn't hurt to follow up with a message and show a real. I loved our interview. I loved the time. I felt we had a good conversation. If you have any concerns, let me know, and I'd love to hear what you have to say. And
That
sometimes it just calls people out for, they're like, oh yeah, I did forget.
Yeah,
And so
and look, equally, I've been at the on the inside where you're just super busy, and there's a pitch, or there's a launch, or there's a deadline, and all of a sudden a day or two goes by, and then it's a week, and then you feed back to your HR. I know what it's like. Everyone,
mm,
but I think it's right. The feels you kind of go through this weird arc where you're hustling, and then you get dejected. But I think it's important to keep your worth and keep knowing that yes, you're putting yourself out there, and you're actually asking, hey, can I come and help over there? Because you guys said you needed help, and I'm really wanting to come and help. That's essentially what you're doing in this process. So don't apologize for that, right? It's yeah, drive for it. I think is a good final piece of advice. So look, I think with that, I like that you've ended there with a couple of really important things for people to do on their own behalf, because I think one thing that has become clear, it's great to have some great recruiters in your corner, and it's great to do your own hustling and your own networking and things, but I think making sure you're covering all of these bits and bats that add up to a successful approach to a new role is vital. So
yeah.
unless do you have any what would your final words of wisdom for the listeners be,
Words
Rosie?
of wisdom. Nope, none of them. No, I think the green shoots piece, I just want to sort of make sure that I finish this. It has been challenging. It's been really tough for everybody. We are moving into a much more positive landscape. We're seeing an increase in applications. We're seeing an increase in hiring. We've seen a huge influx of freelance recruitment, which is a bell ringer for more permanent recruitment if we're going to look at those two divisions within our business. It's just, funding rounds. If you follow the funding rounds, UK and internationally, new election coming up, which always changes things in the recruitment landscape, hopefully for the positive. So there's a number of factors this year that I'm feeling incredibly optimistic for the rest of 2024, and I think everybody else should be too.
Okay, well, look, I think with that we'll leave it there, because I agree. I think the end of last year was just a write-off.
Hmm.
Sorry, last summer was a write-off. It kind of was a little bit of movement towards the end of last year, beginning of this year, a little bit. It died down a little bit, but then there seems to be a little bit of movement again out there now, which is nice. So I think the timing of speaking to you, Rosie, is great for all my listeners, the millions of them, and anybody looking marketing side or agency side, irrelevant. I think keep doing what you're doing. Keep positive, which I know is easy to say, and I have my days where I'm feeling good about stuff, and then days where you're like, for fuck's sake. But keeping
Mm,
positive, keep going, keep hustling. I think take on board some of the things that Rosie's talked about today. There's some things I'm going to do immediately after this, like cull the fourth page and maybe the third page of my CV immediately. And
God,
and
sorry.
no, it's brilliant, and I guarantee everyone listens to this will do it. I guarantee it, because you're right. It's when you're in the situation, you're like, well, I only read the first page, and you know that. But then when you're out here, you're going, let me tell them what I did in 2007 when I was living.
Yeah.
It's like because they might think it's brilliant. So I think it's important to kind of be laser focused. So again, thank you for all of that, Rosie. I'm clearly going to link to Rosie when I post this out. But how do people get in touch with you, Rosie, if they'd like more words of wisdom or they'd like your help?
Please do connect with me on LinkedIn. If it's not me or my division, one of my many colleagues will be able to help. Depends where you sort of sit in the market, but do feel free to reach out on LinkedIn. I'm always here for a call. Try to bring some positive energy to the recruitment process. I know it's challenging, and yeah, just reach out anytime.
Fantastic. Well, Rosie, I can't thank you enough. Rosie's doing this from her office. So some of us are working, i.e. Rose is working. So thank you for taking the time to do this and to speak to the Badlands listeners. And I'm sure they'll all take something out of it, because I know I have. So thank you so much, Rosie. I really appreciate it.
No problem. It's been great. Thank you.
No worries. Thank you.